Palmar Sur, Costa Rica. While clearing the jungles in the 1930s, crews discover hundreds of monolithic stone spheres.
Many of them are huge. I mean, they're 10 feet in diameter. They're gigantically huge. Others are much smaller, the size of a basketball or of a car tire or something like that.
To date, over 300 stone spheres have been found at archaeological sites across the region. And Las Bolas, as they are called, are some of the most precise stone carvings in the ancient world. Some experts believe these mysterious stone balls could be 96% completely spherical.
A perfectly spherical, round ball is hard to make. And in fact, where they're found is a primitive area. So the stone balls that we see at Costa Rica would have been very, very hard to make by just bashing them out with a rock.
We can only imagine how they may have been able to make such perfect spheres. These spheres are carved out of granites and granodiorites. These are very hard, igneous rocks, difficult to work.
Granodiorite is one of the hardest natural materials. It never comes free in nature in the shape of the sphere. So obviously, somebody shaped them. Today, we would need to use diamond tools and laser to shape the spheres.
It almost seems like there was some kind of megalithic carving school who could create the most perfect sphere. Some of them are still hidden within the jungles. So what were they doing there? I mean, why were they constructed?
Jungle-dwelling local chiefs were sometimes buried with some of the smaller balls. But some of the balls are gigantically huge. I mean, in fact, they're so large, they couldn't fit in any grave. So the great mystery with the stone balls really is what their purpose was.
According to the legends of Costa Rica, those stone spheres were used as cannonballs by the god of thunder to drive away the god of wind and hurricanes. Now, these are all wonderful ideas of a story, but as we all know, every story has a core of truth, and the question is, what is that core?
Are the legends of gods battling storms really a description of ancient astronaut machinery at work, as some researchers suggest? And if so, might the discovery of stone spheres reveal the ultimate purpose for monoliths? Bosnia-Herzegovina, 2004. A team of archaeologists discovers stone spheres in forests and creek beds near the town of Banja Luka.
If you go into that area, it's a ravine in a mountainside that's been cut by a stream, and in it are all of these stone balls. Very similar to the ones in Costa Rica. They're half buried in this mountainside, and some are exposed. It is a tourist area, and in fact, Bosnia has 4 or 5 areas where these stone balls can be seen.
The tree was standing there. So with the last storm, the tree fell, and all this, dirt, all this material covered the stone sphere, which is here, right here.
The biggest source of Bosnian stone spheres is the central Bosnian town of Zavidovići. We took samples from 4 different stone spheres and samples of natural stone that we found nearby. And then we did chemical analysis. So the conclusion was those stone spheres were made from the liquid state. They would melt them. They were adding certain additives to get the better properties of material. And then when they got dry in certain molds, they were getting a perfect shape of the sphere.
Like most other monoliths, researchers believe the spheres were likely used for ceremonial rituals. But is it possible that these monoliths, like the stone spheres in Costa Rica, helped create a connection to celestial beings, as ancient astronaut theorists contend?
Another theory of the stone balls is that they were somehow used as star maps, and that they were rolled around and they would show where stars were and their relationship to other areas. Very much like some extraterrestrial map.
It's also said that these stone balls were there to concentrate thought, that they were somehow physical devices, that somehow by touching or working with these stones, we were able to establish a bridge to another dimension.
Luxor, Egypt. Here, along the east bank of the Nile River, lie the archaeological remains of the vast Karnak temple complex, dating to the 32nd century BC. With its numerous structures, including great halls, obelisks, and an avenue of sphinxes, Karnak represents the combined achievement of many generations of Egypt's ancient builders.
When one travels to Luxor and gazes upon the Karnak temple, we see large pillars, oversized obelisks, and what's very amazing about this area is that it's one of the few places where over 30 pharaohs contributed to its sheer size and wealth of knowledge over a vast period of time.
For centuries, archaeologists and scholars have considered Karnak to be one of the most dramatic examples of the remarkable technological ability of early man. But do the construction techniques used in building these incredible monuments reveal evidence of something more, something not of this earth?
When we start looking at hieroglyphs, we are amazed as to how beautiful and how carefully they have been carved. The technology which we see is clearly of a perfection which is beautiful and almost makes our heart cry whenever you come face to face with it.
Experts believe the most impressive evidence of advanced machining can be found on Karnak's tall, four-sided tapering monuments called obelisks.
The obelisk is carved with the same inscriptions on four sides, and they're all exactly the same, and they're beautifully cut and articulated hieroglyphs into this red granite stone.
We would look at it today and say it had to be some sort of machine that carved these things out. For example, there were slots. They were only 0.14 inches wide, half-inch deep. When you look inside, you can see the bottom of them were made by a rotating tool. So this was a tool that punched in, came out, stepped down, punched in, came out. The human hand, no matter how good you are, can never do that. The tool marks themselves, the precision, the depth, the rotating impressions that were made were not done by hand. Some of those were so precisely engraved as to require machine tools to do it. The toolkit that we see that the ancient Egyptians were supposed to use, there's no way that any of those tools could produce the results that we saw.
To many scholars, the apparent precision used in the construction of the obelisks at Karnak suggests a 21st century level of expertise.
Precision is what our civilization is built on. To craft something to within 2/10,000ths of an inch or 1,000th of an inch is quite common today because that tolerance or that precision is necessary and it has purpose.
But how can we explain such precision in ancient construction?
If you look at the Ramses statue, it is so perfect that you wonder how this was even done with allegedly primitive tools. Because today, we could only do this with machines.
So the way we check the symmetry of the Ramses statue is to take two images, the same photographs, make transparencies, and compare the left to the right. We flip it over and bring it over the original. And as we can see, we have a perfect match. The ancient Egyptians were very skilled at working granite. I cannot see how they could have created what they created with the tools that are commonly accepted to have been in the ancient Egyptians' toolbox, such as copper chisels, or stone chisels, wooden mallets, stone balls.
But if, as many historians and archaeologists contend, the ancient builders did not possess the equivalent of modern tools, how were these monuments built with such mathematical precision? Perhaps the answer can be found by comparing an example of ancient sculpture with one made by more modern methods.
We can compare the aluminum model, the face machine, the striations coming down the face with the striations coming down the face of the statue of Karnak in Egypt. And also the tool marks, so where we see above the eyebrow, the dig-in right there, where it kind of shows us what kind of tools or the shape of the tools that they use. So the elements that bring this machining to ancient statue are not just the symmetry, but also the geometry, the precision, and the tool marks. And we have all three elements in modern machining and ancient statuary. It's an enormously difficult thing to do by hand without introducing some mechanical assistance. Seems to me to be impossible.
But if the tool marks seen on the Ramses statue appear identical to those made by modern methods, wouldn't it prove that the ancient builders had access to machines, and perhaps even electricity?
They allegedly did not have electricity, power tools. Supposedly they didn't have diamond saws. But yet, they're doing things that would require precision work, precision tools. So where did they get those things? How could they have had these advanced machining tools that we've only just acquired ourselves today in our civilization? So one answer would have to be they've gotten it from ancient aliens.
Bolivia, South America. Here, 45 miles west of La Paz, isolated high in the Andes Mountains, lie the mysterious ancient ruins of Puma Punku. Spread across a desert plateau at an altitude over 12,000 feet, the megalithic stones found here are among the largest on the planet, measuring up to 26 feet long and weighing more than 100 tons each.
These are the mysterious ruins of Puma Punku, nearly 13,000 feet in the Altiplano of Bolivia. What you have here are massive blocks of granite scattered like some kids' toy blocks around the site. It's like some giant cataclysm just wiped out this entire area. Archaeologists are baffled by what Puma Punku was, how it looked, and what the purpose of this enormous structure would have been.
Mainstream scientists believe the site was originally constructed about 2,000 years ago. But in 1945, archaeologist Arthur Poznansky proposed that Puma Punku was much, much older. By examining the structures and what he believed were their original alignment with the stars, he dated the ruins to 15,000 BC.
Arthur Poznansky was a researcher who was part Bolivian. He had worked at the site for many decades, and he concluded that the site must have been built about 17,000 years ago by studying the archaeoastronomy of that particular site.
We don't know how old Puma Punku is. We have had some circumstantial dating, but we have been unable to date the stones of Puma Punku themselves. They could be thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. We don't know.
I think the fascinating thing about Puma Punku is how did these structures get built? We're talking about stone that is 25 feet high, stone that is hundreds of tons.
Puma Punku is so unique in the way that it was constructed and shaped and positioned that it is the most intriguing ancient site on the planet. Of all the places I've ever visited, Puma Punku is the one that I go back to time and again because no one can solve the mystery.
Mainstream scholars believe the andesite blocks found at Puma Punku were formed by hand with primitive stone tools. But some researchers point to the intricate stonework as evidence of the use of advanced precision technology.
One of the amazing things here at Puma Punku is the precision of the blocks. You can see with this block of granite that it's really been cut at very accurate right angles. Not only do these granite blocks have precision corners, but they also have these difficult drill holes that are going right through the rock.
But how could such primitive people, living perhaps tens of thousands of years ago, have produced such flawless stonework? Might the ancient builders of Puma Punku have fabricated the megalithic stones with advanced technology? Technology of an otherworldly origin, as ancient astronaut theorists believe.
If you look at the stones carefully and you get a magnifying glass on some of them, you can see some intricate stonework, as though they're using machine tools or even lasers. It's absolutely incredible. I've seen nothing like it anywhere on the planet.
When an architect or an engineer looks at Puma Punku, one thing jumps out immediately: that whoever built this place had knowledge of planning, of logistics, and had access to advanced technology.
You know, Brian, this is one of the most interesting and unusual stones here at Puma Punku. It's got these perfect right angles. And then each of these small drill holes are basically evenly spaced along this routed groove. To me, it's clear that power tools have been used on this unusual block of stone here.
Well, exactly, and this surface is as smooth as a tabletop, like in your kitchen. There's no wave to it or anything. This was machined. But who machined it? It's an astonishing piece of work, and how anyone could think that primitive human beings could have done this. You know, it's just crazy. If anything looks like ancient aliens, it's this stone.
But if otherworldly technology was used at Puma Punku, where is the proof? In Danville, Illinois, machinist and toolmaker Chris Nunn has put the Puma Punku stone through the ultimate cutting test, using both laser technology and a modern diamond saw.
We've got a sample of the laser cut. This is the diamond wheel cut, and the top surface is the original cut surface from Puma Punku. So now we can compare the difference between all three cuts.
Looking at the stone under a microscope, Dunn compares the two modern cutting techniques with the part of the stone cut thousands of years ago. Though age has worn the surface of the ancient example, the comparison reveals distinct differences.
You've got vitrification on the laser cut side, and then of course you've got circular tool marks on the side cut with the diamond saw, and then whatever tool they used to cut the ancient surface must have been a different method.
Now, do you think it's possible that some type of a diamond precision tool was used on the old surface, but because it was such a long time ago, that over time the surface became a bit more rough, and we're talking 10 or even 15,000 years ago?
That is a reasonable speculation. I think we have to start examining a little more sophisticated tools that no longer exist.
Peru, South America, the Andes Mountains. 9,000 feet above sea level, in an area the Inca people once called the Sacred Valley, lie the ruins of the ancient city of Ollantaytambo. Once serving as both a temple and a fortress, mainstream historians claim Ollantaytambo was built around 1440 AD by the Inca Emperor Pachacuti. But some scholars believe Ollantaytambo was built upon the ruins of a far older city, one whose origins remain unknown.
The gate behind me is called the Gateway of the Gods, and it was built several thousand years before the Inca arrived here. It was built by a culture we call the Uranpacha. We give them that name because we have no idea who they were, where they came from, or where they went. It's clearly evident that the earliest parts of Ollantaytambo dates to at least 12,000 years old, if not older.
From the research I have been able to determine, this was built by the Arak civilization. The Arak people are as ancient as what would be the equivalent to Adam or the first humans.
But how could the earliest humans on Earth have produced such astonishing stonework? With massive interlocking blocks precisely fitted together? Or have constructed aqueducts and irrigation systems that still function today? Or have moved and set colossal stones of granite, each weighing more than 50 tons?
Ollantaytambo is a mountain fortress. It's renowned specifically for the incredible sized blocks that were used in its construction, most particularly those that are found on its highest level, on the highest point on this mountain. There are 6 of these positioned in a line, and they were transported from another mountain where the source is, across a plain, across a river, and then up the mountain. And of course the biggest mystery is how the hell were they not only able to cut these things, but to move them up this mountain.
In modern day, if we were going to move a 50-ton boulder, we would have to assemble a special transportation unit consisting of steel girders, several axles, hydraulic jacks. Moving it up the hill, we'd probably have to change the face of the hill, build a road, maybe anchor it using some kind of cable and pulley system, several different options, none of which would be available to the people who lived way back then.
These 6 giant slabs of red granite have stood here for thousands of years because of the beautiful engineering of the ancients. If there is a major earthquake,
These shims can ride up and down, absorbing the shock of the earthquake, and that keeps the giant slabs in place. The ability to fit perfectly fitting stones of several tons in weight together so that a single human hair can't fit in between them is not a question of sweat or man-hours. It's a question of technology.
Mainstream archaeologists claim the dense hard granite was cut and shaped by means of stone or bronze tools. But evidence of such tools has never been found at the site. And stranger still is the means by which the mammoth rocks are bonded into place, as if fused together by an unknown form of energy.
It's almost as if two stones were leaned together and they infused it with some type of high radiation beam or a laser that would then fuse the rocks together. They could then stack a third rock and create another fused area. There is no explanation for how they had the ability to create such a high heat source and fuse these rocks in such an intricate fashion.
Further evidence of the mysterious methods used by ancient craftsmen can be found nearby, at the Temple of the Condor. Here, enormous slabs of andesite stone were quarried from what is known as the Wall of Living Rock.
The Temple of the Condor is curious because we find huge cube-like sections of stone, andesite, which is very hard, have been removed from the mountain with such accuracy that we can't find a scratch in the surface. The corners also are not sharp, they're perfectly rounded, and no one can explain how this could have been achieved.
The rock surface looks rough, but when you touch it, it feels as smooth as a bathroom mirror, which means some type of a vitrification process was used. And at the bottom of where this alcove was cut out, we can see a crisscross pattern, and in my opinion, they are actually saw marks. To me, this pattern is irrefutable proof for ancient machining.
Prehistoric tools would never work. You see, Ollantaytambo is mostly made out of andesite. To cut andesite, you need something which is harder than andesite. You could use a diamond. But there was no tool in Stone Age time to cut these rocks, so it must have been an extraterrestrial tool.
Might the ancient engineers of Ollantaytambo really have used tools acquired from otherworldly sources, as ancient astronaut theorists contend? Perhaps clues can be found by examining the earliest creation myths of the Andes Mountains. In them, the ancient ancestors, or founders, were described as a brother and sister, referred to as children of the sun. Sent by the sun god, these mysterious beings arrived on Earth with something described as a golden wedge.
Was this golden wedge some sort of handheld device that could cut stone and even possibly levitate the giant blocks into place? If the golden wedge used by the children of the sun was really some kind of high-tech device for cutting stone or levitating stone, it would probably have been given to them by extraterrestrials.
The fact that Ollantaytambo specifically has this story about this golden wedge leads me to think that some type of extraterrestrial activity took place there thousands and thousands of years ago. And that some type of sophisticated extraterrestrial technology was used in order to achieve some of those amazing feats of engineering that we can see at Ollantaytambo today.
What you can't explain is the moving of 50-ton stones up the sheer face of a cliff to create the walls of the fortress. That in and of itself required more than cranes, more than lifts, more than scaffolds. It required something like an anti-gravitational device or a tractor beam to lift that much stone that high. And that's why people see this as an example of help given to an earthly civilization by ancient aliens.